and sisters, in continuation with our approach to the pillars of Islam and Iman, an approach which is based on the moral foundation of Islam, that the essence of the message is a moral message. It is a message which calls us to morality with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wherein we worship Him alone, without partner, and we avoid worshiping others along with Him, instead of Him, as go-betweens between ourselves and Him, because that is immorality. That is gross immorality with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are generous, kind, truthful, etc. with our fellow human beings, because that is what Islam calls to. That is what the pillars of Islam call to, the pillars of Iman call to. That is a part and parcel of the message of Islam. And we avoid deception, treachery, all forms of activities which involve taking the rights of others, whether it's through bribery or any other way or common practice. We avoid all of it because that is immorality. It involves taking the rights of our fellow human beings. No matter how logical it might seem, because unfortunately we have Muslims who will argue that it is okay for us to deceive the non-Muslims, to cheat them, to exploit them. Why? Because they're going to hell. Their money is not going to benefit them anyway. So better we take it in this life and make good use of it. There are unfortunately Muslim brothers and some sisters who rationalize this. But this is not the Islamic way. This is not what Islam taught. Morality isn't a special morality amongst Muslims and immorality amongst others. That was the Jewish way. That is why in the Old Testament you have today written for Jews that taking interest is forbidden among the brethren, among fellow Jews, but permissible among the non-Jews. For sure, Allah didn't dictate that to Prophet Moses. This is what they wrote. Interest for us is forbidden across the board. We don't have a special morality amongst Muslims and immorality amongst non-Muslims, justifiably. No. And even to the creatures, as we mentioned before, we have responsibilities. Responsibilities before Allah to treat the creatures that He has created in this world honorably. Even the dog, who Muslims in general try to avoid, sometimes going overboard. Although Islam does not forbid the keeping of dogs in certain contexts, to protect the home, to herd the sheep, to hunt with, etc. Seeing eye dog, if a person who is blind. These are permissible. Though, as I said, Muslim society in general, has come to a position where the dog is just can't have anything to do with the dog. But even given that, we avoid taking the dog as man's best friend in the sense that we're going to now live with the dog. He sleeps in the bed with us. We kiss him when we get up in the morning. No, this is not our way. But in spite of that, we don't go over to the other side where we now harm the dog. Anytime you see a dog, our kids are throwing stones at them. No, this is not the Islamic way. So much so that Prophet Muhammad narrated to us a story of a woman who was a prostitute from among the Israelites, who, coming to a well to get some water, found there a dog dying of thirst. So she climbed into the well, tied her shoe to a scarf, dipped it in the well, brought water out, and fed the dog. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah forgave her sins and put her in paradise. Is there a higher level of the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals than that? The West now has made this a whole big fanfare, Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, where they go to extremes. They go to other extremes. But we have set 1,400 years ago the criterion of how to deal with the creatures of this earth. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ set it 1,400 years ago, when other people weren't even thinking about it. They didn't start thinking about it until this century. So, Islam is a moral message. And in the previous khutbahs, we started looking at the pillars of Islam from that perspective. In the first khutbah, we looked at the Shahadatan, the two declarations of faith, and the moral principles that were to be extracted from them, focusing primarily on honesty, openness, sharing the good that we have with us. The Dawah comes out of that also. That if we have what is the way to paradise, we should have a concern for others and a desire to want to share it with them. And we looked at Salah and the principles behind it. That the Muslim speaks well when he opens his mouth or her mouth. What they have to say is good, because the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever believes in Allah on the last day either speaks good or is silent. Silence is golden. It's better to be silent if we have nothing good to say. But it's no good to be silent if we have something good to say. So silence is not golden in the ultimate sense. There's a time when silence is golden, and there's a time when it is not. As the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever sees evil should change it with his hand, and if he can't, he should change it with his tongue. So we cannot afford to be silent if we are able to speak and evil is happening around us. We should speak out against it. And also, the Salah in training us to say what is pleasing to Allah, because that's what we say throughout the prayers. Also what we do, that we control our actions during the prayers. So that when we come out of the prayers, we do things which are also pleasing to Allah. Bowing before Allah, prostrating before Allah, standing before Allah, sitting before Allah, calling on Him, being conscious of Him. These actions are actions dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this reminds us that outside of Salah, we should also do things go to places, be involved in this life in such a way that our actions are all pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third of the pillars, Zakat. Sometimes people put soul instead, but Zakat is the one which we see most often in the Quran, where Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. We see when Allah says to establish the prayer, most often after it He says, and pay the zakat. Establish the prayers and pay the zakah. Zakah we translate as obligatory charity, though it's something of a contradiction in terms. Charity is something you do voluntarily, but Islam has made it something obligatory. Made it obligatory in order to develop the characteristic of generosity. This is one of the moral characteristics which Islam engenders, promotes. Generosity. And generosity is a characteristic which all societies respect and hold in high esteem. Islam makes it a religious duty. It makes it ibadah. Acts of generosity are acts of ibadah, where it is done for the sake of Allah, where it is done for the pleasure of God, then these acts of generosity become worship in Islam. And that is basically what Zakah is establishing there for us. That this be a part and parcel of our character. And it has its own impact in society. It deals with a reality which Allah has created human society in. That reality is that some people have more than others. That is how Allah created the society. People are not equal. And the test is to be patient with what one has, what Allah has destined for one, and to be thankful to Allah for what one has been given, more than others. This is the test. That we're not jealous of those who have more, and we're not neglectful of those who have less. Generosity is, as I said, one of the highest characteristics that we can develop. And that is the reason why Zakah was set for us. However, it is also to deal with that reality of people being on different levels in the society, that Allah has destined some people in the society to have less, so He has also made it an instrument within the Muslim society to take care of the needy members of the society, ensuring that the wealth circulates and is not stuck in only one segment of the society. But as a moral principle, what it is addressing is generosity. Now, when we give zakah, for us, this is not in and of itself an act of generosity. When we give zakah, this is an act of obedience. Obedience to Allah. Because it is obligatory on us. 2.5% of our wealth is to be given to the needy. Allah states in the Quran that in our wealth there is a right for those who are poor and needy. They have a right. And we have an obligation to fulfill that right. That obligation, when we fulfill it, we are obeying the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The generosity comes now from what? From voluntarily giving what we call sadaqah. We now give from ourselves charity, having been forced to give from our wealth, our accumulated wealth, 2.5%. Having been forced to give that, it has broken something of that desire to want to hold what we have, not share it with others. So having broken that desire, then we can take from our wealth and give to others. And this is where the generosity now is manifest. And as I said, this is among the highest characteristics that a Muslim can acquire. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. I say that asking Allah to forgive myself and yourselves and calling on you to turn to Him to forgive our sins, because He is the only one who can forgive sins. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. The distribution of zakat involves knowing those in the society who are in fact needy. Distinguishing between those who are illegitimately begging and those who really are in need. In the Quran, when Allah specifies the poor, He uses two terms: al-fuqara wal-masakin. Linguistically, they sound about the same. Fuqara, poor; masakin, needy. Poor people are needy. Needy people are usually poor. However, the distinction which the scholars have made, the fuqara are those people who are known to be poor. They really don't have anything. And it's clear, you can see them in their circumstances. Whereas the masakin are those people who are poor, but they don't show it externally. You would have to do some research to find out who they really are. And as Muslims, we are expected to find out those who are needy, who don't put their hands out, who don't call on others for help. They patiently bear their situations and struggle on. It is the duty of Muslims to find out. And this is what Salah in Jama'ah does for the Muslim community. That people are praying together, they get to know each other, they become aware of the needs of the individuals of that given community where the masjid is. That is the idea, it's part of the idea. A social consciousness is developed from Salat al-Jama'ah. This is why Prophet ﷺ made it obligatory or highly recommended for Muslim males in particular to pray their 5 times daily prayer in the masjid. To be aware of each other and their states. So, part of zakah involves developing a sense of compassion and concern for our fellow human being. Because we are required to go and find out who are the needy so that we can give for them. Give the zakat to them, make sure the zakat reaches them. Where the society doesn't have an organized system of zakat, it becomes an even greater responsibility for us as individuals to do it. In the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, zakat collectors were sent out. And they collected the zakat. And people also came forward and gave. Today, in general, most Muslim societies, unfortunately, there's no collection. It's left up to people. A lot of people do give, but a lot of people don't. So, for us as Muslims today, this characteristic of compassion is very, very important. When we look at the state of Muslims, Palestine, Iraq, etc., and Afghanistan, the issue of compassion becomes very, very critical. If we hear this information, we see the news on the television or whatever, and it's not touching us, we don't feel anything, means that that quality, that characteristic of compassion is dead in us. Means a part of our faith is destroyed. Because it is a part of the faith to be compassionate for our Muslim brothers and sisters, and for people in general in the world, where we see suffering. Zakah, developing in us this sense of generosity, should create in us also this sense of compassion. And I should say that that sense of generosity in itself has influenced many non-Muslims to accept Islam. I know personally, listening to some of the stories of some Americans who had come to this part of the world during the first Gulf War, many of them had accepted Islam after it, and talking to them as to what motivated them, a number of them used to say that when we were out on maneuvers in the desert with our gear, and we'd come across a Bedouin out there in the desert in his tent, and he would see us, he would call us over. They'd come over, sit down, and tell him to sit down. He'd make a fire, make up some tea, some coffee ready, not tea, coffee, and offer them some dates. And he couldn't speak their language, English, and they couldn't speak his language. But the language of generosity, they could respond to it. Respect. That here is this man meeting total strangers who invites them into his home and gives. Something they said, really, we didn't come across this anywhere else in the world that we have been stationed or assigned. You know, it touched many of them. Just that act of generosity, and led them to want to know what it is in this man's background and culture which would cause him to be like that. And this was Islam. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. When he has told us to send peace and blessings on the Prophet ﷺ, it is to remind us of the example of generosity that he gave. He left this world with nothing. Not a dirham or a dinar remaining. Though he was the ruler of Arabia, Islam had conquered Arabia in his time. He could have lived the most comfortable of lives. Yet, till he died, he slept on a bed made of the fronds from the palm tree, the branches, coarse, rough, covered with a thin layer of leather, so that when he lay on it, the fronds would protrude through the leather and leave marks on his body when he got up. that was the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. An example of simplicity, who whatever came to him, he gave. He gave, and he gave, and he gave. Who left an example on his closest friend and companion, Abu Bakr, who when the society was called to contribute for the cause of Islam, he brought all of his wealth and gave it to the Prophet ﷺ immediately. And when asked what did he leave for his family, he said he left Allah and his Messenger. And who impacted on his second most closest companion, Umar ibn al-Khattab, to give half of his wealth in a similar way. He left a legacy of generosity. This quality which we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put in our hearts, to allow it to grow within our hearts, and to share what Allah has blessed us with others. We ask Allah to remove from our hearts stinginess and love of this world, which leads us to deprive others of their rights. And we ask Him to put in its place care and compassion for our fellow human beings. We ask Allah to make us generous for His sake, and to bless us in our generosity. And we ask Allah to raise our families in this same tradition.
The world's first tuition-free degree, BA in Islamic Studies. Access the knowledge, any place, anytime, anywhere. It just doesn't get any easier than that. Classes, texts, assignments, completely online. Set your own schedule for the semester. No overseas travel required for the exams. Subjects taught by qualified English-speaking scholars. Weekly live sessions and virtual classrooms. With curricula based on those in Al Madina University in Saudi Arabia, Al Azhar University in Cairo, and other reputable institutions around the world. Why wait any longer? You pay just a symbolic registration fee and are ready to begin the adventure of higher education. The most diverse student body of any university in the world. 130,000 plus registered students from 217 countries. Log in to the website for more details. www.islamiconlineuniversity.com